decision by Tua. That does it for us tonight. Thanks for watching. Banfield starts now.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the program. It is a Tuesday. Wait, is it? Yeah, it is Tuesday. You know those days that you think you're already 3/4 of the way into the week? Yeah, I thought it was Thursday. It is Tuesday. So bear with me, because it was a very big day in a courtroom where it felt like I was in there for a few weeks. The Sarah Boone case. We call it the suitcase trial because, you know, she's accused of killing her boyfriend by zipping him into a suitcase and then filming him and taunting him and ignoring him as he was begging for his life because he couldn't breathe. Yesterday, we showed you the suitcase made it into court, but today, that lady, right there, Sarah Boone, decided it was in her best interest to get on the stand and talk. And talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. She did. But as you know, as good trial watchers, good true crime fans out there, it's always easy when your own lawyer is asking the questions and you're on the stand. It's like a cakewalk. You can practice for that. It is not so easy when the prosecutors take over and do what's called a cross-examination. And boy, oh boy, were they cross. Anyway, I will let you be the judge of how she did on the stand today, because she spent the better part of all day trying to explain herself. What's interesting, though, is when they asked her to reenact the zipping. That is never good. It's like asking the accused killer to handle the murder weapon. You'll see it all in a moment. And then this next story, Bachelor Number 1. If you saw the movie about the dating game killer, they called him Bachelor Number 3. But in reality, he actually, if you were alive back then and watching the dating game, he was Bachelor Number 1. He had charm, he had charisma, he had everything. And in the 70s, those were good looks too. But he was already well on his way to becoming a pretty prolific American serial killer when he was flirting away with the Bachelorette. He won the date. But the story I want to tell you tonight is the stuff you don't see in the movie, because there is some unbelievable stuff that the movie left out. Like, one of his victims was a victim twice. One of his victims was attacked by that killer twice, and she survived that serial killer twice. She is live with me on the program tonight, so she can tell you firsthand what he's like, was like, what she went through, and why back in the 70s the culture was so awful when it came to women, police, rape, reporting, that most of them would not do it. Many don't even do it today. And what that yielded in terms of a death count. It's an incredible story. I urge you, if you know the story at all, just watch this. If you haven't watched The Dating Game, it's a good story to follow, just because I think you'll get a hint at how much damage was done because women were ignored. All right, then, this one has really bothered me. This Texas mom of 4 vanishes after a fight with her husband, witnessed by the neighbor across the street. And then that husband she was fighting with ends up in jail, not charged with her killing or not charged with her disappearance, just charged with being bad to her. But the bail is so high, it sure looks like the writing's on the wall for him. Until today. Today was a what? As they continue to try to find Suzanne Simpson, as they look and try to reunite 4 kids with their mom, another character ended up in jail. And oh yes, he is connected to Brad Simpson, the hubby. And as they say in so many of these industries, especially journalism, follow the money. So tonight we're following the money, and I'm going to take you to that story in just a moment. First, though, I'm going to start here. Accused killers who go on trial don't always have like a whole lot of options available. Now take accused killer who points her camera at the victim and taunts and mocks him as he dies a slow and agonizing death. Those options dry up pretty darn quick, don't they? A lot of people in Sarah Boone's position would have taken that plea deal that was offered and the 15-year prison term that was offered. But that was last week, and this is this week in the murder case of her boyfriend in a suitcase back in 2020. But Sarah Boone has other ideas, and Sarah Boone, right there, she has a bizarre sense of confidence. She chose to bet it all and hope for the best from a jury. And today, she pushed that bet even further. She took the witness stand in her own murder trial, and she told her story under oath. First to her friendly lawyer, and then, of course, to that less than friendly prosecutor called cross-exam. She had 4.5 years, cooling her heels without bail behind bars. 4.5 years to perfect what she was going to say on the stand. So which story do you think Sarah Boone told the courtroom? Was it story number 1 that she told to the police? I zipped him into the suitcase for fun and games, and then I accidentally fell asleep and he suffocated. Sorry. Or was it story number 2? Story number 2 is the one that her 9th lawyer floated in the last few weeks, that she was a battered spouse just defending herself from a guy in a suitcase. And wouldn't you know it, Sarah Boone decided to tell both stories today. For almost 3 hours, Sarah Boone testified that George Torres Jr. put himself in the suitcase. She says she zipped it up to be funny, but then, with Torres trapped and helpless, or as her lawyer puts it, a captive audience, she took the opportunity to attack him verbally for all of his past alleged abuses towards her. She said at some point it dawned on her that if Torres ever got out of this predicament, and that suitcase in particular, he would kill her. So, she says, she made a point of keeping him in that suitcase. Try as I might, I cannot do any of this justice if that is actually the word that I should be using right now. You honestly need to hear it for yourself.
At one point, I guess he knew that I couldn't come up with anything else, tapped me on my knee and said, "You're it." So from there, I ran up the stairs and hid into our shower, just waiting for him to find me so we could hopefully go to sleep soon at some point.
So you were hiding?
I was trying.
Okay. And did you believe that he was going to come try to find you?
Yes.
Did you wait?
Yes, for quite some time.
All right. Then what did you decide to do?
That I decided that I need to go to sleep. I'm picking my son up the next day, and we need to start wrapping up the evening. And I went downstairs to find where he was. I looked over and I saw him settling himself in the suitcase.
All right. When you got up to him, did he see you?
Yes.
All right. Tell us what happened.
I zipped him up. We thought it was funny, and we're joking about how he was, I guess, small enough to fit inside of the suitcase. From there, I moved the suitcase around a couple of times, just kind of on the wheels, and moved it around. And at that point, it was funny. We were joking and laughing about it. The suitcase had, for me moving it around, was flopped over. So while it was like that, I thought at that point I had a moment to, I guess, take the time to talk to him while I guess he was not able to get out for a moment. That's when I went over and decided to videotape to just see the jest in it, for him to understand that right now I feel safe, and right now I have the ability to actually speak to you in a manner that normally I would not have the ability to do.
So between the 2-minute video and the 22-second video is an 11-minute period. Would you tell the jury what happened?
We continued to, I guess, speak to one another, and his tone changed, and I knew the tone, and we ended up, I guess, arguing back and forth with one another, and it was things that he was saying very much frightened me, and cursing at me and threatening me. And
did he want you to let him out of the suitcase?
I'm sure so.
Okay. Go ahead, tell me.
And it just got very heated very quickly, and he continued to push on the suitcase. And my fear was that he was going to break out of the suitcase, knowing that it was a broken suitcase. And his hand started to come through. His hand started to come through this way. And so I shook the suitcase, trying to get his hand to go back in, shaking it, and telling him that, please stop doing this. Please stop doing this to me. Please stop doing this to me.
If he would have gotten out of the suitcase, what would he have done to you?
Like he used to tell me, he probably would have made me unrecognizable, or I would have lost my life.
Like I said, that was the friendly questioning. But when the state got its chance to take a crack at this defendant's version of events, the jury saw something else. They saw flashes of the old Sarah Boone, the Sarah who chewed up and spat out 8 previous attorneys and who demanded hair and makeup in court and demanded snacks at the defense table. Have a listen.
Question between these two movies is this is when he begins to get angry and trying to push his way out and to get out of the suitcase, correct?
Angry again, yes.
Okay. And he was expressing his anger in what manner? How did he say this?
At which point throughout the day?
Ma'am, you know very well that I'm talking about between these movies. Please answer my question. Between these two movies, how did he express his anger with you?
Told me that I was going to die.
To end the day, the prosecutors did something, pretty clever. They had Boone put on gloves and then show the jury exactly how she zipped George Torres into that suitcase. And this is where I bring in Joel Waldman. He is the host of the very popular podcast, Surviving the Survivor, and he's the author of the book of the same name. And there it is. Okay, Joel, so that moment. I'm going to ask our control room to cue up that video, because that's just one of those things you don't expect, because it's a murder weapon, technically, and you don't usually expect to see an alleged murderer picking up the murder weapon in the courtroom. So walk me through that moment as we roll that tape.
Ashleigh, thanks for having me on. And while we watch this tape, I can tell you for sure that this was the most dramatic moment in the trial today. Everyone in the courtroom was kind of incredulous that Will J., who's the lead prosecutor, asked her to come up. She did, in fact, go to the front of the courtroom, was about to open that suitcase, unzip it, and suddenly the lead defense attorney, James Owens, looks up, sees she doesn't have gloves on, says, go grab a pair of gloves. And all of a sudden there was also an objection, which was odd, from James Owens, having to do with a paper clip on the zipper itself. There was a paper clip at one point on that zipper. It was removed when it was brought into evidence, and then they put it back on. So James Owens was making this cockamamie kind of ask of the judge, can we keep this paper clip on? Will it be accurate? The judge looked at him like he was insane. Anyway, Sarah Boone goes to open this. Everyone in the courtroom, the jurors, members of the media, people in the gallery, I believe the judge himself, everyone stood up and watched, and it was just absolutely eerie knowing that that is, as you said, the murder weapon, and that's exactly where George Torres' life ended.
And I don't know if she's purposely struggling to get that thing open to show this isn't old hat for me. I'm not going to lie, Joel. I can't stand this woman just from all the pretrial coverage that I've done. And I struggle to hide my disdain for this woman. I wonder if you're seeing any facial cues on jurors so far.
Well, you're not alone. I can tell you that. There's a lot of people that really have a lot of animus towards her, especially within our podcast community. Jurors are interesting in this case. It is going to be a panel of 6 with 8 alternate jurors. What struck me the male jurors really look like they're not buying it. And sometimes it's contrary. You think that women, might be more sympathetic, but women can be tough on other women, and they seem to be kind of throwing some daggers and a few scowls her way. But overall, I would say the jurors have a collective poker face. They are very, very attuned to what's going on. They're focused. They're taking notes. And if they're not taking notes, their eyes are glued. Whoever's on that witness stand, periodically, of course, looking over at Sarah Boone when she's on the defense table and also the gallery. But they are completely invested in this. One other quick thing, Ashleigh, one of the jurors is a domestic violence survivor herself. She's going to be a witness in a trial against her ex-husband, who's accused of beating her. Interesting choice for a jury selection there.
Wow,
yeah.
Okay, so how did that happen? Like, that's like the first question usually on the jury questionnaire when you're doing a domestic violence case. Have you ever been a victim of domestic violence? How was that not a strike for cause right away?
I asked the exact same question, and it's interesting because today when they were going through this litany of domestic violence, alleged domestic violence against Sarah Boone, that's when she looked down and was furiously taking notes. So it's interesting. I automatically assume that is a gift to the defense. Here you go, someone who can sympathize. And then I spoke to a bunch of lawyers who said, look, if you're a true DV victim, and many true DV victims don't believe that she's acting like an actual victim. So they said that it could actually help the state. I'm asking the same question. Why take the risk? We have no idea how her impact is going to be on this jury.
That makes perfect sense. I'm not going to lie. Now that I think about it a little further, the victim in this case is a victim of domestic violence. He died in that suitcase begging for his life. So maybe, just maybe, that person will see it that way, as opposed to what is being said on the stand. Speaking of what's being said on the stand, we just got treated to like a little Susan. What was it like watching her hour after hour?
I mean, this was the most highly anticipated moment of this entire trial. It was supposed to happen earlier in the day. It got delayed. There was also talk, by the way, that it was going to be this narrative testimony because there were so many conflicting stories. We never got to that point. James Owens, the lead defense attorney, got up there on direct. She was very calm. She was obviously really well rehearsed. One of the advantages of going to trials, and Ashleigh, you know this, is you take elevators up and down with some of the defense and some of the prosecutors. And I happened to ride the elevator yesterday afternoon with the defense team. And guess what? They were going over the jail at 9:30 p.m. last night, and I think they were there till 1 or 2 in the morning. So she was really well coached. A lot of people thought she did really well on the direct, and then on the cross by prosecutor Will J., a total change in her voice. It raised up. The tone got harsher. She started dropping a lot more expletives and kind of salty language, so you could see the dichotomy there.
Well, from one salty language user to the other one, it ain't great to do that on the stand. I try not to do it on TV either, but you know what I mean. You're not going to endear yourself to many as a poor victim who is desperate to protect herself if she's going to behave like that. Hey, you got to come back, Joel Waldman. Great observations. Thank you for this.
Thank you for having me.
Look forward to the next one. Okay, still to come. How many people can say that they escaped a serial killer? Pretty damn few. There's the salty language. Now how many can say that they escaped a serial killer, the same serial killer, twice? Rodney Alcala was convicted of murdering 7 people back in the 70s, but police think the number is closer to 130. One woman who managed to survive was attacked by him twice as a teenager. And that guy ended up on the dating game? She is live with me next with her harrowing story. When most people think of a psychopath, charm and charisma are not the first traits that come to mind. But in the wrong hands, those can be deadly. Rodney Alcala was a psychopath of the highest order, a serial killer with charm and charisma to spare. That's what got him greenlit for this. He's a contestant on The Dating Game back in 1978. And when that spotlight came up on him on the stage, he just so happened to be right in the middle of an 8-year murder spree. There is a new Netflix movie that tells the whole story.
I've been on this show since 1968. The one thing I've learned is, no matter what words they use, the question beneath the question remains the same.
What's the question?
Which one of you will hurt me?
And Bachelor number 3, I'm counting on you. What are girls for?
I get the heebie-jeebies with that, too. That's the real Rodney Alcala right there through the ages. You know, his looks and charisma certainly ensured a steady supply of victims or potential victims. And because it was the 70s, when rape victims were often chastised for wearing a short skirt at the bus stop, Rodney wasn't caught nearly as soon as he should have been. You can just ask Morgan Rowan. She fell under his spell in July of 1965 when she was just 13. At that time, Rodney was 21. She was out with friends in Hollywood at a club for teenagers when she tried to get Rodney's attention by lightly scratching his arm. He hugged her, so she's 13, right? She scratched him again, playfully. And that's when Rodney grabbed her violently and dragged her into an alley, slamming her head against a wall and knocking her out. When she came to, again, 13, she was pinned against the wall by a dumpster and she was badly beaten. Alcala was gone, and Morgan Rowan, 13, simply hoped that she'd never see him again. But she did 3 years later, in 1968. By then she was 16 and partying with some friends on the Sunset Strip. Alcala suddenly appeared when her group piled into a car to go to an IHOP. He was in the driver's seat. Nothing happened at the restaurant, but when he was driving them all back to the Sunset Strip, he took a sudden turn towards his house and promised the kids weed. Once inside that house, he grabbed Morgan and he threw her head first into his bedroom and put a bar across the door. He took off his belt, wrapped it around his fist, and punched her square in the face with the buckle, and then punched her repeatedly in the stomach until her ribs broke. That's when he tied her up and raped her. Morgan's friends, wondering where the pair had gone, went and knocked on the bedroom door, and it was locked, and no one would answer. So one of the friends went around outside and broke a window, and that seems to be the only thing that stopped the attack and allowed Morgan to get away. She was too terrified to tell her parents. And of course, she was too terrified to tell the police. She was 16, and it was the 70s. Eventually, a friend sent her a letter and a newspaper clipping showing Rodney Alcala just 1 month after that horrifying attack with the belt buckle had lured an even younger girl into the same apartment. And amazingly, that 8-year-old victim, Tali Shapiro, survived. Amazingly. Despite being raped and brutally beaten with a steel bar, that little girl survived. If it weren't for a good Samaritan who followed Rodney's van and called the police because he spotted a little girl getting into it and thought, that doesn't look right, it is likely that Tali would have died. But Rodney escaped out the back, police looking after the little girl who was nearly dead. He escaped out the back, and it would take another 2 years before they caught him. In 1971, he was arrested in New Hampshire, and he was sent back to L.A. to answer for what he did to Tali Shapiro. Here's where it's even more frustrating and sad. At such a young age, Tali's parents didn't want her to testify. So the prosecutor said they didn't have enough to go on without their key witness, and they gave him a deal. I get angry just saying those words. Didn't have enough to go on? What do you mean you didn't have enough to go on? The police slammed open the door and found Rodney naked, and the little girl almost dead in a pool of blood with a bar across her neck. Didn't have enough to go on? Anyway, he took the deal, pleaded guilty, 1 count of child molestation, 34 months. That's it. Spent 34 months in prison. And when he got out, he made up for lost time, raping and torturing and murdering at least 6 adult women and another little girl, 12-year-old. He was arrested again for the final time in 1979, and then in 1980, the gavel came down and he was sentenced to death. Then came decades of appeals and reversals and retrials, all of it culminating in 2010 when he was convicted once again and once again was sentenced to death. In that trial, he acted as his own attorney. And Tali Shapiro, that once 8-year-old victim who survived, testified against him. Alcala died in prison 3 years ago, natural causes, age 77. That same year, 2-time survivor Morgan Rowan, remember, 13 first time round, 16 second time round? She contacted an investigator, and after holding her secret for a half a century, she told her story. She also reached out to somebody else. She reached out to that other little girl, Tali Shapiro, after all those decades of guilt for not having reported her attack to the police. And those 2 women have now become friends. Rowan also wrote a book about her and Tali's ordeals called Stolen from Sunset. And I am pleased to tell you that Morgan Rowan is standing by and is going to join me live right after this break. It's sad to say it, but serial killers are not exactly rare. But survivors of serial killers, those are very, very rare. My next guest survived the so-called dating game killer, Rodney Alcala, not just once, but twice. First at age 13, and then a second time at age 16. And when you hear about what this monster did, it is a miracle she survived at all. He was eventually convicted of murdering 7 young women, including a 12-year-old girl. But in the 1970s, police at this point think that number could be as high as 130. That 2-time survivor is Morgan Rowan, and I'm very happy to welcome her to the program. Morgan, thank you so much for being on with me tonight. You know, I read your account, and I think back to the 70s. I was pretty young. I was born in 67, but I even remember what it was like for anybody who might consider reporting a rape or a sexual assault. And I'm wondering how much that played into not reporting the first attack in the alley and then not reporting that second horrendous near murder.
I actually did talk to a police officer, but there is no actual report because the police officer told me that I had gotten into his car, I had gone into his home, that I knew him and that no one would ever put him away for rape. He told me I needed to get into the car, go back to that house and face him and talk to him. And I couldn't do that. So I refused to sign a report. But I did talk to a police officer.
So that is absolutely remarkable. He suggested that the resolution to all of this would be to get back in a car and head back to the... Yeah. I mean, at this point, I think rape is one thing. He was an attempted murderer at this point as well, because I think at one point, did you say you were blacking out because of the chokehold and the belt and the buckle that he'd stuffed in your mouth?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, when he was talking to me, I had, my head bounced off the wall, bounced off the floor. I'd been strangled. I couldn't speak. I had broken ribs. I couldn't take a breath. I was wrapped in a blanket so he couldn't see. I had a few knife wounds. He couldn't see any of that. He could just see my face turning red and getting ready to turn into a black eye. And, my face was beaten. That's all he could see. I was
What doesn't make any sense, sorry, Morgan, what doesn't make sense is the police had witnesses. Your friends had to break into the room. And he literally stood up and said, take her. And all of you escaped the house. There were other witnesses, a vehicle with a couple driving it that nearly hit you as you ran out almost naked into the road. They got your whole group to safety. None of this was enough for the police when you reported this to them?
He didn't ask. The police at that time didn't like hippies. They didn't like the kids in the street. They didn't like, they thought we were troublemakers and we made their jobs harder, and they just literally didn't like you. And, that's what he saw. He saw as just two people fighting. He didn't really see, he just couldn't get a grip on what had actually happened. Men always got the, benefit of the doubt in those days.
So, as I understand your story, you were too afraid to, sorry, what's that? As I understand it, you were too afraid to tell your parents about what had happened, and yet you ended up having to sleep beside their bed because of the trauma and the PTSD you went through. I did.
I wasn't afraid to tell them. I was afraid of what would happen if I told them. When the police officer told me that they would never put him in jail for rape, I knew that my father would go after him. And I was afraid that Rod would kill my father, or that my father would kill him and go to prison for life. And my mother was not emotionally stable. I was concerned about her mental health also. But I was really afraid of what it would do to my family. I wasn't afraid to tell them.
I look at his face, and I understand the reports that he had charm and charisma, and I get it. I get why he would be a contestant on the dating game, but it must make your blood boil to see that he got so far along in his life and in his killings. When you think back to this, have you come to terms with it? Does it still eat away at you?
It does, but I really, we didn't have the internet then. You didn't have, I moved from California to New York. It wasn't big news in New York. So all I knew, I had to keep following it on microfilm in a library was the best I could do. And I know he eventually was charged with what he did to Tali, and he was given a life sentence, but with parole. And it never occurred to me that I'd ever let someone so vicious out. So I knew nothing else about him. I just thought he was in prison for all those years. It was probably another 30 years before I ever knew anything else about him. And then I realized he killed a 12-year-old, that he had killed other women. They spoke of serial killer. It was impossible for me to wrap my mind around, even though I know what he did to me, but to picture him going out and hunting women down and getting out again and again and again from prison is really, really hard to accept. It does make me angry.
If I have the timing right, it was about a month after his assault on you that he picked up his 8-year-old victim and nearly killed her as well. I wonder, when you think about Tali Shapiro, the guilt that you lived with.
It haunted me. I had no way. She was 8, so they're not going to tell you her name or her condition or anything. So I wasn't even sure she was still alive. I was terrified. I couldn't get any information on her. I never knew anything about her until she appeared in the trial, and that was 30 years later. It was the first time I ever knew that she was alive and well, and she'd been beaten in the head. I just never expected her to be fully well. I was just thrilled to see that she was okay.
Morgan Rowan, I am so thankful that you are brave and are telling your story. I think it's so important for people to realize how far we've come, but how far a lot of rape victims still need, society to go in terms of dealing with these kinds of horrific crimes against women and men as well. Thank you for this. I really appreciate it.
Well, that's why Tali and I have decided to, she doesn't want to do it either. Neither one of us really want to do this. But I think it's really important to other people that are holding secrets to see that I told this story. It's not a pretty story. It's an ugly story. It doesn't make me look good sometimes. But I told this story, and I'm still here. And my life is still intact. And I want to encourage other people to do the same.
Well, far be it from me to argue with someone like you, but I will say you do not have any issues with not looking good. I think what you're doing is brave, and I remind everybody that it's been half a century since what you went through, and times were so different then. I completely understand. Thank you again for doing this. Really appreciate it, Morgan.
Thank you.
Okay, still to come. Next. It is never a good sign when the police start searching a landfill after a mom goes missing. And it's even worse when they arrest her husband. But mystery turns to intrigue in Texas when they arrest that husband's business partner. That just happened in the case of Suzanne Simpson. When we come back, we follow the money. If mother vanishes into thin air, it is no big surprise when the police look hard at the husband, especially when the woman's last known sighting was in a fight, physical, with that husband. Sure enough, a Texas man named Brad Simpson has been in a San Antonio jail since shortly after Suzanne Simpson went missing the night of October 6th. But as the search for Suzanne drags on, with little to nothing to show for it, the investigation itself is growing. Initially, Brad was hit with 2 misdemeanors, which somehow merited a $2 million bail. Later, we learned of a federal charge over an unregistered rifle. And now police have arrested a one-time business partner of Brad Simpson's, named James Val Lee Cotter. The charge against Cotter, tampering with evidence relating to Suzanne Simpson's disappearance and now presumed death. Police haven't given up looking, but they no longer expect to find Suzanne alive. For more on all of this, I turn to Sig Christensen, investigative reporter for the San Antonio Express News. So, Sig, who is James Val Lee Cotter to Brad Simpson, and what do they think he was tampering with?
They've known each other about 25 years. They have been business partners for a long time. I don't know if they still are, but they were. And they worked for Cotter's father, who owned a company here in town. When he was alive, he was a big landowner. He owned a lot of properties, and so they worked for him. And of course, in some of our stories, we've documented their legal troubles. They were sued by a company called BJ Corp in 2012. They ended up not being found guilty in that particular case. The company ended up paying almost $1 million. The Cotter company paid $1 million to BJ Corp.
So that's weird. Let me jump in there for a second, because it would seem to me that would divide this Cotter fella and Brad Simpson, and that they'd be mortal enemies. But here they are. If the direction of this investigation seems accurate, it looks like the police think he's helping Brad Simpson hide something. What do they think he was doing for Brad Simpson?
Well, they know that he was helping them. They have looked at they've looked at Cotter's cell phone, and I want to go back to something that we have posted on our website, which is a fascinating comment. It seems that Cotter received a text message from Brad Simpson saying, "You've got to move quickly. I don't have much time." This is about a day or two after his wife has gone missing, and so Cotter takes an AK-47 and takes it back to his house. He takes it from a vault in Brad's house, Brad Simpson's house, and he takes it to his home in a ritzy part of town called the Dominion, and he hides it. Well, the authorities found it using a dog that's trained to sniff out weapons, and it's a Chinese-made AK-47. I don't know if it's legal or not.
That now makes a little more sense. Well, that makes a little more sense. If there's an AK-47 and someone's being asked, hurry, I don't have much time, and that was moved, that could be the story. Sig, I got to wrap it there. I'm just short on time tonight, but I want to have you back because I know that there's another development to drop any moment now. Thank you for this.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Coming up next, it was a jailbreak. It was a manhunt. It was a mystery. But what really set the saga of Casey White and Vicky White apart, Casey being the dangerous felon, Vicky being the jailhouse guard, was the love story. And long after that story ended in tragedy, the question still remains, did Casey really love Vicky? or was he just using her? We have some never-before-seen video that might finally reveal the truth, and we're playing it next. The reason that love is the #1 plot line in a Hollywood blockbuster. You never really know if the love is real or all an act. Take Casey and Vicky White, for instance, the inmate and the unrelated jail guard who helped to bust him out of an Alabama prison 2.5 years ago. That pair was on the run for 11 days until the lawmen caught up with them in a high-speed crash. Casey was cuffed. Vicky died of a gunshot wound. And we all wondered, was he just using her to break free? Or were they really in love? I'm not sure if this contraband video that we got that was shot by another inmate from behind bars is going to shed any light, but Casey sure looks like a shell of his former self. Take a look.
All right, my brother Casey, and I just wanted to show the tattoo because people were questioning whether you was actually, I know because they can't believe you lost weight. Weight is good to lose, whether people know it or not. But man, I'm just thank you that you are here with me, able to share again with the people. They do have a whole bunch of questions. People want to ask a lot of things, and you just told me you don't feel comfortable with even discussing certain things when it comes to, and I understand that, because that woman love you and talking about her deafness, and then you feel comfortable with it right now. But that kind of love that she displayed is beyond natural. It's beyond the normal kind of love. It's just most people don't have that kind of deep love for a person. And I know you just feel in some kind of way you feel that maybe nobody ever loved you as much as Vicky. Would you kind of agree? Does that make sense?
That's true. Vicky loved me a lot.
She
loved everything for me, and I loved her just as much.
Exactly.
She was my world.
She was your world.
She took care of me, looked out for me.
All of that.
Got me love, gentle kindness.
Yes.
And I love her.
That's right. So,
and y'all watch the new Netflix.
That's right.
I need a pen pal.
And you need a pen pal. You need somebody right. Casey White.
Casey White.
That's something. So is he a man in mourning? Or is he a convicted murderer with only time to kill now? Thank you for watching, everybody. Stay tuned. Cuomo starts now.
Chris Cuomo here. Thank you very much for joining us at NewsNation. We are exactly 2 weeks from Election Day. And in fact, there's already voting going on, and it's telling us something. More Republicans are voting early than they have in the past couple cycles. And personally, my belief is more voting, more better. I think campaign periods should be shorter, voting periods longer. Mail in